Okay, let's put an airfield onto a playfield. This is the playfield we're going to work with. It's a beautiful Monster Bash. I can't wait to see it lit up. One more look at what comes in the box. This is a light cable. You get 38 of these. Every cable has a foam plug on one end and 2 LEDs on the other. And note that the 2 LEDs have different color wiring. One has red and black and the other one has yellow and green. The first thing that you're going to want to do with all of your cables once you've unpacked them is to spread the wings out a little bit. Spread out the wires like that. That'll help them to stay facing the proper direction once we get to mounting the lights onto the playfield. When you spread them, be very, very gentle. You don't want to pull the wire away from the LED. You want to get as close to the LED as you can and spread the metal wire that's actually a part of the LED. And then they'll just stay exactly like you spread them. This is the main circuit board. These are the brains of Airfield. Right here is the power jack where you insert the AC adapter. Right here is the power button. It's a yellow button. Right here is the debug switch. It goes between diag and play. In almost all cases, you just want it in play mode. If you want to know what diag does, you can visit our website. Over here is the micro SD card holder. To get an SD card in there, all you do is just gently press it in until it clicks. If you want it out, you press it again, and a spring pushes it out. If you get any kind of friction or it won't go in or it won't come out, just gently wiggle it around a little bit, give it a small push. Don't yank it or don't pull too hard. The most important thing to note is where all the lights go. So around the edges we have these gray jacks and they're labeled on the inside here 1 through 64, and that's our main bank. It's what we call our main bank, or it's what pinball heads might call control lights. Those are the main lights that you'll use with Airfield, and any of the lights will plug into any of the jacks. But the same lights will plug in to the black jacks right here. The black ones are for general illumination, or GI. And you'll see later when we look at the software the difference between those two, but basically any lights that are plugged into the general illumination are usually just on all the time, but they can be faded all together as a single group. So they all take the same, brightness setting. Whereas all of these control lamps can be controlled individually. Any one of these can be on and any one of these can be off at the same time. We also have an AC adapter, standard power plug, and a bunch of twisty ties, some mounting hardware, and some labels. Notice that the colors on the labels are the exact same colors as the wires on the light cables. We also have some Gorilla Tape, which we're going to use to mount all of the wires onto the back of the playfield. All right, so let's turn this around and get started. Okay, I've turned the playfield around and I've already kind of gotten started mounting some wires. Don't worry about that right now. I'll show you how to mount the wires. But the first thing that I should decide is where I'm going to put my circuit board. Because I'm going to end up mounting the circuit board after all the wires are on there, because in a lot of cases you're going to have wires beneath the circuit board that have to go on first. But because there's going to be a lot of tape down, I want to make sure that I know where I can mount this. There's 4 mounting holes and they should all go into wood, obviously. You don't want it to punch into any of the wires or any of the inserts. So I'm going to take a look here. I know that I'm going to have power coming into the power jack here. So I'm going to want that facing down because that's going to go down towards the power outlet. And I want it down towards the bottom of the playfield because, again, that's going to be closest to the power source. So I think right here works really well for me. If I put the board up there, it's only covering one insert, and I have wood underneath each of the 4 holes in the circuit board. So I'm going to take a pencil, and once I make sure that I'm away from the inserts in all 4 holes, I'll just mark these with my pencil. Great. Now, I probably want to pre-tap those. The screws that come with the mounting hardware are self-tapping screws, so you should just be able to take the screw with a 1/4-inch nut driver and just start those holes. Don't go all the way through with these screws though, because they are exactly the same depth as the playfield itself. You probably won't poke through, but in any case you don't want to try to put the screw all the way in. Just go maybe half in and get the hole started. Okay, now that I know where the circuit board is going to go, I can start mounting the cables. I find it's easier when I'm working vertically like this to go from the bottom up. So I'll start mounting down here and work my way up, as opposed to starting up here and having to work around all these wires that are hanging. So the way to do this is you just take your LEDs, you face them in towards the inserts, obviously, and you find two inserts that will take both of the LEDs, like that. And you want to find a position for it so that the cable rests gently without bending these colored wires. So obviously the phone cable, the white cable, might have to go out to the side sometimes, or maybe it even goes up. That's fine. Just find a spot where both LEDs can reach an insert. And they don't have to be a part of the same series of inserts. They just have to be a part of the same bank. So whatever two LEDs you have on here, they need to be a part of either the main bank or the GI, obviously. So I'm going to find a couple inserts down here. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to mount them on there. I'm going to take 2 to 3 inches of my Gorilla Tape after putting both lights down. And I'm just going to tape over the insert and the wire. Now once I've done that, I want to label the cable. So I'm going to take my labels, and I'm going to take off a number. It doesn't really matter what number you pick, especially on a cable that's going to be so close to the circuit board. I'll explain what I mean in a second. But let me just first label this cable once at the LED side. So that's going to be number 1 and 2. And then I'm going to take my second sheet of labels and I'm grab the same numbers, 1 and 2, and I'm going to label the other end of the cable down here by the connector. Great. So now that cable's labeled. Those are lights 1 and 2. And when I mount this up here, just like that, I will end up plugging it in to the jack labeled 1 and 2. Just like that. Now the one thing that I want to be careful about is if I have any inserts that are really far away from the circuit board, such as these 3 up here, these 3 probably are going to have a hard time reaching down underneath here. They're going to have an easier time reaching these jacks. So when I go to mount these LEDs, I want to label those something from this top row. So it'll be LEDs 33 through 48. So that's probably just something to keep in mind when you're wiring the ones that are far away from the circuit board. Once you've mounted your cable and applied the labels, you want to store those wire positions. There's a couple ways you can do that. One, you could go straight to our software once you're familiar with it, and you can just go ahead and drag the lights on to these positions. Lights 1 and 2 would go onto these 2 inserts. But since we haven't gone over the software yet, I'll describe another method, which is just to take a picture of the back of the playfield and write on the picture itself the positions of these 2 LEDs. So if I look at this cable, on the label, it's telling me that the green and yellow wire is LED number 1, and the red and black wire is LED number 2. So I know this is number 1, and this one is number 2. So I'm just going to write that down right here on my sheet. Number 1 and number 2. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for all the other cables, and then we'll go ahead and plug it in and see how it looks. Alright, cool. So now that's done, and we have this beautiful mess of cables that we're going to tidy up in a minute. But the next thing to do is to mount the circuit board onto the back of the playfield using the 4 holes that we pre-drilled before. The way to do that is, first of all, I'm going to make sure my orientation's right. I've got my power jack facing towards the power supply. In my case, it's going to be down. I've got my 4 spacers and my 4 screws. The screw goes into the top, into the hole. The spacer goes on the back, and it keeps the circuit board mounted slightly off of the playfield so that the wires can pass underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and mount all 4 screws and put it into the playfield. Alright, great. So now that's on. When you're tightening them, make sure just to do it a little bit tight. You don't need to crank it in there. It'll probably just end up stripping the wood out. This isn't going to receive any kind of pressure or torque. It's just on there to basically secure it. So don't use too much pressure. Just get it on there. All right, so that's pretty secure. Now we plug in all the cables. We're going to look at the numbers along the interior of the circuit board and plug in the plugs into their correct numbers. Okay, now all the light cables are plugged in. We can go ahead and power up the Airfield and see if they all turn on. Great, so now it looks like everything is working pretty much as expected. All of the inserts are just running on a debug light sequence that we have embedded to the Airfield. This is what you get if you don't plug in the SD card. So just keep that out for right now and power it up, and you should see the lights come to life. And they're going to run through them one at a time, and then they'll run through them, turning them each off one at a time. So if it seems like everything's working as expected, which it is here, the next step is just to tidy up the cables using the zip ties that we included. All right, great. So now the cables are on, the Airfield is mounted, everything's connected, we're pretty much done with the hardware. The next step is the fun part. It's when we get to program the light sequence that we're going to install on this. But I'm going to cover that in another video. So I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you found it helpful, and you can see the other videos at ledsec.com.